When I came back from a business trip, I was shocked to walk into my wife's room and see several men having fun with her, entering all her holes. Now I will tell this story from the beginning. I never thought I'd be one of those people who question the trust they have in someone they've loved so deeply. But as I sit here in this quiet, dimly lit room, the reality of my situation presses down on me. My wife, Amelia, who I met when we were barely 20, has become both a stranger and a mystery. Amelia and I married young, probably too young. She was ambitious, with a spark in her eye that made her look like she was ready to take on the world. Back then, I couldn't imagine spending my life with anyone else. The whirlwind romance, spontaneous road trips, late-night talks about dreams, fears, and the future made us feel unstoppable. We moved into a modest place right after college, thinking we'd grow together, weather whatever life threw at us. For a while, it was everything I'd ever wanted. But lately, things have been different. I can't pinpoint when exactly, but there's been a shift, a subtle, creeping sense that something's off. It all started innocently enough, or so I thought. My job in consulting meant more late nights and business trips than I'd expected. Amelia seemed supportive, if a little distant. We'd always been good about checking in with each other, sending little messages throughout the day, but her replies became delayed, sometimes sparse. I shrugged it off, figuring she was busy with her freelance graphic design projects. She'd taken on a few new clients recently and was working odd hours to meet their demands. A few weeks before I left for my latest business trip, I noticed that Amelia was going out more. She said she'd joined a women's gym downtown, and some days she'd be gone for hours. Other times, she'd come home in high spirits, talking about new friends she'd met there. I was glad to see her making connections and getting out of the house, but something about the way she'd look at her phone mid-conversation, or excuse herself to the other room to answer a text, gave me pause. One evening, I decided to ask her about it. "Who's keeping you so busy these days?" I said, smiling as I poured her a glass of wine. It was meant to be a light-hearted question, but her reaction caught me off guard. She stiffened slightly, her smile wavering before she forced a laugh. "Oh, just some friends from the gym," she replied, her voice a little too casual. "You know, people you run into regularly and just get to know." It seemed plausible enough, but that tiny shift in her posture, that hint of unease, planted a seed of doubt in me that I couldn't quite shake. The week leading up to my business trip was especially strange. She was unusually affectionate, almost as if she were compensating for something. She'd make my favorite meals, leave little notes in my suitcase, and once even surprise me at the office with lunch. I wanted to believe it was just her way of showing love, but there was an intensity to her actions, like she was overcompensating. It made me wonder if there was something she wasn't telling me. Maybe I'm just paranoid, I told myself as I boarded the flight to Chicago. The trip was only supposed to be a few days, a standard conference with back-to-back meetings and late nights networking. But I couldn't shake the feeling that things at home weren't as they seemed. The first night away, I called Amelia. She answered, sounding cheerful enough, though there was a bit of noise in the background. She brushed it off, saying she was watching TV, and I believed her. But something about her tone felt distant. I decided to chalk it up to a long day and the stress of being apart. The following nights were no better. Each time I called, she sounded more distracted, her answers short and vague. She'd say she was tired and needed to turn in early, or that she was about to step out with one of her friends. I tried to suppress my growing unease, convincing myself that I was just imagining things. She's just adjusting to a different routine while I'm gone, I thought. But deep down, I knew there was more to it than that. On the last night of the trip, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling back to Amelia's behavior, piecing together every subtle change. My logical side told me that I was being unreasonable, that we were both just young and adjusting to the realities of marriage. But that tiny voice of doubt kept whispering, gnawing at me. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I tried to reassure myself. "You'll be home tomorrow, and everything will be back to normal," I told myself. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. The next morning, I took the earliest flight back, hoping that seeing Amelia would put my mind at ease. I imagined her waiting for me, the way she used to, with that warm smile and open arms. Maybe she'd tell me how silly I'd been to worry, how she'd missed me just as much. But as I pulled up to our apartment, a strange sense of foreboding settled over me. It was quiet, too quiet. I entered, expecting the usual sounds of home, but instead, there was silence. A chill ran down my spine as I noticed that a few things were out of place. Amelia's coat wasn't on its usual hook by the door, her keys weren't in the bowl, and a faint, unfamiliar scent lingered in the air. "Amelia?" I called, hoping she'd pop out from the bedroom or the kitchen, but there was no answer. I set my suitcase down, my mind racing as I checked each room. She wasn't there. Feeling a pang of confusion and dread, I tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. I told myself that maybe she just stepped out, that she'd be back soon, but my gut told me something was wrong. I walked around the apartment, feeling like a stranger in my own home. Little details caught my eye: an empty wine glass on the coffee table, a pair of unfamiliar shoes by the door. The anxiety that had been simmering inside me during my trip started to boil over. As I sat on the couch, waiting for her to come home, I felt an overwhelming urge to know the truth, to find out why everything felt so different. In that quiet apartment, I realized that whatever I was about to discover might be more than I was prepared for. But I had to know, and so I waited, each minute stretching into eternity, my heart heavy with the weight of suspicion and the faint hope that I was wrong. But deep down, I knew the answers were coming, and I wasn't sure I was ready for them. I must have waited for hours, alone in that empty apartment, pacing, my mind spiraling into every worst-case scenario. My thoughts chased one another, each darker than the last. I kept telling myself she was just out with friends, maybe running an errand. But those unfamiliar shoes by the door, they sat there like a silent confession. Finally, I heard footsteps in the hallway, and the lock turned. Amelia stepped in, looking surprised to see me. "Alex!" she exclaimed, her face breaking into a wide smile. She moved to hug me, but I hesitated, just long enough for her to notice. Her smile faltered, a hint of worry flashing in her eyes. "I came back early," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, hoping she wouldn't notice the suspicion clinging to every word. I tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. "Oh," she replied, looking slightly flustered as she pulled out her phone. "I must have turned it off by accident. I'm sorry, babe. I didn't expect you back so soon." She glanced around, her gaze falling briefly on the shoes by the door before quickly looking away. "So, where were you?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. She was back, and I wanted more than anything to believe there was a simple explanation. She fidgeted with her purse, avoiding my eyes. "I was out, just with some friends from the gym." I forced a smile, though inside I felt a rising unease. "That's good. I'm glad you've been having fun." She relaxed slightly, her shoulders loosening. I wanted to press her for details but held back, afraid of what I might hear. Later that night, as we lay in bed, I could feel the distance between us more than ever. She lay facing the other way, silent. I stared at the ceiling, running through every sign, every moment that hinted at something hidden, a truth she wouldn't share. In the days that followed, things between us were strained. I returned to work, but my focus was gone, my mind trapped in that apartment, replaying the memory of her nervous smile, the unease in her eyes. Every time I looked at her, I saw the cracks widening between us. Then, a week later, I stumbled on the first piece of evidence that shattered any hope of dismissing my suspicions. I had been working late in our home office, going over some reports, when her laptop chimed with a notification. She had left it open on the kitchen counter. Curiosity, or maybe desperation, pushed me to look. I told myself it was innocent, just checking to see if she'd gotten a message from the gym. But what I found was something else entirely. The notification was from a man named Ryan, a name I'd never heard her mention. I clicked on the message, my stomach twisting as I read. "Ryan, hey, I'll send over the rest after next time. You're incredible, worth every cent." I sat there, frozen, the words blurring on the screen as I tried to make sense of it. My mind wrestled with possibilities. A misunderstanding, a sick joke, anything but the truth that was slowly seeping into my heart. She was meeting other men, for money. The messages went back weeks, all with the same casual intimacy, filled with compliments and suggestions of upcoming meetings. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat like a blow, and I couldn't stop scrolling, unable to look away as I pieced together her double life. How had I missed this? How had the woman I'd loved, the woman I'd vowed to spend my life with, become someone I barely recognized? I closed the laptop, my hands shaking, my breath ragged. I sat there, alone in the dark, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me, suffocating. I thought about waking her, confronting her right then and there. I wanted answers, wanted her to look me in the eye and tell me what I'd done to deserve this. But some part of me hesitated, holding back. Maybe it was fear. Fear of what I might hear, of the truth that could shatter the remnants of our life together. That night, I slept on the couch, or tried to, but the question lingered in my mind, gnawing at me. Why? The next morning, Amelia found me still in the living room, bleary-eyed and hollow. "Alex, are you okay?" she asked, her voice thick with concern. The softness in her tone felt like an insult now. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just didn't sleep well." I tried to act normal, but the images from her messages flashed behind my eyes every time I looked at her. It was like a crack in a dam, the smallest fissure that grew with every moment until the flood was inevitable. Later that night, after dinner, I decided I couldn't keep pretending. We were sitting in silence when I turned to her and asked, "Amelia, are you happy?" She looked startled by the question, her fork hovering in midair. "What? Why would you ask that?" "I don't know," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "I just feel like things have been different between us." She set her fork down, her expression hardening slightly. "Everyone goes through rough patches, Alex. I thought you understood that." "I do," I said, my pulse quickening. "But sometimes, it feels like you're not here anymore, like you're living a life I know nothing about." She glanced away, a flicker of guilt crossing her face. "Alex, don't be ridiculous. I'm here, aren't I? Maybe we just need to spend more time together, focus on us again." Her words sounded genuine, but I couldn't ignore the images, the messages that had torn through whatever trust one still had. My chest felt heavy, my throat tight. "If that's the case, is there anything you want to tell me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a long pause, her face carefully composed, her eyes avoiding mine. "What are you talking about?" "I don't know, Amelia. Just anything. Anything at all." A flicker of something, fear, panic, crossed her face, but she quickly masked it, forcing a smile. "No, Alex. There's nothing. Everything's fine." Her denial cut deeper than if she'd confessed outright. I nodded, numb, and the rest of dinner passed in silence. The days blurred together. I began to feel like a stranger in my own life, going through the motions, all the while wondering if she could feel my suspicion, if she knew I was unraveling the truth. I started taking longer hours at work, anything to avoid the empty silences that filled our home. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at the office, I found myself parked outside the gym she supposedly went to. I'd driven there on impulse, not even sure what I was looking for. But as I sat there, I watched the entrance, waiting, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. Hours passed, and still, she didn't show. I went home that night with a sinking feeling, and when she walked through the door with a carefree smile and an excuse about running late, I felt something inside me break. I didn't confront her then, either. I simply nodded, pretending to accept her story, but in my mind, the truth was solidifying, becoming undeniable. She wasn't the woman I thought I knew. A few days later, when she left for another one of her appointments, I logged back onto her laptop. The messages with Ryan had continued, each one chipping away at whatever remained of our relationship. "Ryan, same time next week? Can't wait to see you." Her reply was short and teasing, as though this was a game, something thrilling and casual, a secret she could hide behind her smile. My hands clenched into fists as I read, feeling anger rise in me, a bitterness that burned. I didn't know what to do next. All I knew was that my marriage, the life I'd spent years building with her, wasn't what I thought it was. Amelia, my wife, was leading a double life, one she clearly didn't want me to be a part of. But the worst part? I still didn't know why, and I wasn't sure I could bear the answer. In the days that followed, my mind swung between disbelief and anger, each emotion taking its turn to fill the hollow ache inside me. Every time I saw Amelia, I felt the chasm between us growing wider. The messages I'd read, the hints of her double life, it all played on repeat in my mind, haunting me. I knew I had to confront her, to finally drag the truth out into the open. One night, after a quiet dinner, I decided that enough was enough. "Amelia," I said, setting down my glass, "I need to talk to you. Really talk." She looked up, her smile faltering. "What's going on, Alex? You've been distant lately." "Have I?" I asked, feeling a strange mixture of resentment and pain. "I don't know. Maybe I'm just trying to figure out who I married." Her face went pale, her fork hovering over her plate. "What are you talking about?" My hands clenched under the table as I took a breath, steadying myself. "I know, Amelia. I know about the messages, the meetings, the men." For a moment, silence stretched between us, so thick and heavy that it felt like the walls themselves were closing in. She looked down, her lips parting as if to say something, but the words caught in her throat. She looked afraid. "I don't know what you're talking about," she finally whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Don't lie to me, Amelia. I saw the messages. I know you're seeing someone, maybe more than just one person." She shook her head, her eyes wide, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the table. "Alex, please, it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" I demanded, my heart pounding. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like my wife has been sneaking around behind my back with other men. For money." Her face crumpled, and she buried her head in her hands. I could hear her shallow breathing, each breath heavy with panic. "I never meant for you to find out like this," she whispered, her voice choked with tears. "Then explain it to me," I said, the hurt in my voice uncontained. "Help me understand, Amelia. Why? Why would you do this?" She looked up, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I was just trying to make some extra money, just enough to get by while you were gone so often. You were always so busy, Alex, so caught up in work. I felt like I was invisible." Her words hit me hard, but they didn't make sense. This was more than loneliness or insecurity. "So you decided to start escorting?" "Amelia, there are other ways to make money. You're talented. You're smart. Why didn't you tell me?" She hesitated, swallowing hard before speaking. "At first, it was just small things, doing freelance work, a few side projects here and there. But those were never enough. And then, I met someone at the gym. He made it sound so simple. Easy money. A chance to earn more than I ever could doing freelance. I felt a bitter anger rise in me. "So you went along with it? Without telling me?" She looked away, shame written all over her face. "I didn't want you to know. I didn't want you to see me as someone who needed that. I thought I could keep it separate, that it wouldn't touch us." "It did, though," I said, my voice trembling. "It touched everything. It's torn us apart, Amelia. How could you even think I wouldn't notice?" Tears began to fall down her cheeks, silent and slow, each one a testament to the regret I wished I could believe in. She was breaking down, but I was beyond sympathy. I needed answers. "Tell me, Amelia, how long has this been going on?" She closed her eyes, visibly wrestling with herself before answering. 6 months. It started about 6 months ago. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. 6 months. Half a year of deception. Every single day we'd shared for those 6 months felt tainted, poisoned by the secret she'd carried. And you? How could you keep this up for so long? Her voice was barely a whisper. I thought I could handle it, that it was just a temporary thing, a way to make quick money. I didn't realize how much it would change everything. A bitter laugh escaped me. "Change everything? Amelia, you sold our marriage. You betrayed me. You put a price on us. How could you?" She looked away, her shoulders hunched, and I saw the guilt etched across her face. But guilt wasn't enough for me. I wanted her to understand the depth of the hurt, the hollow emptiness she'd left me with. "I loved you," I said quietly, unable to keep the pain from my voice. "I thought we had a future together. I thought you were. I thought you were happy." She reached out as if to touch me, but I pulled back. "Alex, please. I made a mistake. A terrible, awful mistake. But I love you. I never stopped loving you." My jaw clenched as I forced myself to stay calm. "If you loved me, Amelia, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have kept this secret, wouldn't have lied to my face night after night. I don't know if I can ever trust you again." Her hand fell, and she stared down at the table, her face a mask of despair. The weight of her betrayal pressed down on us both, suffocating any semblance of the love we'd once shared. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't recognize the woman sitting across from me. This wasn't the girl I'd fallen in love with. This was a stranger who'd sold her integrity, her love, and her loyalty for a few quick dollars. Finally, I pushed back my chair, standing up, feeling like I couldn't breathe in that room anymore. "I need some time, Amelia. I need to think." She looked up, panic flashing in her eyes. "Alex, please don't leave. We can work this out. We can get through this." But I couldn't listen to her anymore. I walked to the door, grabbing my keys, ignoring the sound of her quiet sobs as I stepped outside. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to remember who I was before all of this. The night air was cold, biting through my thin jacket as I walked aimlessly down the street. The city lights blurred around me, my mind a whirlwind of memories and unanswered questions. Everything felt surreal, like I was caught in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I kept walking until I found myself in a small park we used to visit. The bench by the fountain was empty, so I sat down, my mind replaying her words, her excuses. How could I ever trust her again? How could we go back to the way things were? The reality settled over me like a weight, pressing down on my chest. Maybe we couldn't go back. Maybe some things, once broken, could never be repaired. As the hours slipped by, I tried to make sense of it all, but the pain remained sharp, raw. I thought of our wedding day, her hand in mine, the promises we'd made. We were supposed to face everything together. How had we come to this? And then, just as dawn began to break over the city, a single question surfaced in my mind, one that I knew I had to ask her before I could decide anything. I didn't know if I wanted to hear the answer, but I couldn't move forward without it. I walked home slowly, the weight of the question heavy in my mind. By the time I reached the apartment, I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. I unlocked the door and found her sitting on the couch, looking as if she hadn't moved since I left. "Why?" I asked, the single word breaking the silence. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed, her face pale. "Why what? Why did you think I wouldn't be enough? Why did you need them?" Her lip trembled as she spoke, her voice barely audible. "It wasn't about them, Alex. It was about me. I felt like I was fading away. I thought this would give me something, make me feel alive again." Her answer hit me like a punch to the gut. She hadn't done this because of them. She'd done it because of something inside her, a void I couldn't fill, no matter how much I loved her. It was her emptiness, her restlessness, that had driven her to betray me. I nodded, feeling something inside me shift, a painful realization that maybe this wasn't something I could fix. "Then maybe," I said quietly, "this is the end." She let out a choked sob, but I didn't wait to hear her reply. I turned, leaving her in that silence, my heart heavier than ever. The words echoed in my head long after I left the apartment. "This is the end." They sounded definitive, like a door slamming shut. But as I walked through the city's quiet streets, I realized that even though I'd said them, I wasn't ready to face what they meant. I wasn't ready to let go of the life we'd built. A part of me still held on to the hope that she'd wake up, apologize in a way that felt real, and find a way to make things right. But what did right even mean now? I spent the next few days in a cheap hotel downtown, trying to figure out what to do. I went back and forth between calling her, ignoring her, demanding answers, or simply pretending it was all some sick dream. But there was no denying it anymore. My wife, Amelia, the woman I'd trusted with everything, had been leading a life I knew nothing about, and I wasn't sure there was a way to come back from that. One night, I got a call from her. The screen lit up with her name, and for a moment, I stared at it, torn between picking up and letting it go to voicemail. My thumb hovered over the button before I answered. Alex. Her voice was soft, almost broken. There was an emptiness in it that matched the hollow ache inside me. Yeah. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I know it sounds empty, but I don't know what else to say. I closed my eyes, letting out a sigh. I need to understand, Amelia. I don't need an apology. I need the truth. She was quiet, and I could hear her breathing on the other end. Then, she whispered, "Do you want to meet?" There was a pause before I replied. Yeah, let's meet. We agreed on a small coffee shop, one we'd been to a few times. It was quiet, tucked away from the bustling streets, and I figured it was as good a place as any to confront the ghost of what we'd once had. I arrived first, sitting at a corner table and nursing a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. When she walked in, I barely recognized her. She looked smaller, somehow, her usual confidence replaced with a nervousness that seemed foreign to her. She sat down across from me, folding her hands in her lap and looking anywhere but at me. For a few moments, we sat in silence, the weight of everything between us filling the air. Why didn't you just tell me? I asked finally, breaking the silence. If you were struggling, if you felt lost, why didn't you talk to me? She took a shaky breath, her hands gripping each other tightly. I don't know, Alex. I wanted to. So many times, I wanted to. But every time I thought about it, I couldn't. I felt like you'd look at me differently, that you'd see me as weak, or worse, desperate. You don't think I would have understood? My voice was quiet, the pain evident in each word. I would have done anything for you, Amelia. I thought you knew that. Tears filled her eyes, and she looked away, wiping them quickly. I know, Alex. I know. But at some point, I think I stopped believing that anyone could help me, not even you. She sat back, the confession taking the last bit of her strength. I don't know. I felt like I was losing myself. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about control, like I was reclaiming something I'd lost. And then, one day, I looked up and realized I was in too deep. But by then, it was too late. Her words stung, and I felt anger bubbling up again. So, this was what? Some kind of experiment? A thrill? No, she replied, her voice sharp, breaking through her quiet tone. It wasn't like that. It was God. It sounds ridiculous even to me now, but at the time, it felt like I had no choice. Like I was stuck in this cycle, and no matter how much I wanted to stop, I couldn't. So instead of turning to me, you turned to strangers. You put a price on yourself, on us, because you wanted to feel something? Amelia, how do you think that makes me feel? She looked down, her face contorted with shame. I know I hurt you. I hurt us, and I hate myself for it. I took a deep breath, my anger mixing with sadness. I've been trying to figure out if this was some kind of punishment for me. Maybe I wasn't around enough. Maybe I was too focused on work. Was this your way of getting back at me? Her face softened, and she shook her head. No, Alex. This was never about you. You were always enough. I was just not enough for myself. I sat back, absorbing her words. They should have brought me some comfort, but they didn't. Instead, they just deepened the chasm between us. How could she claim to love me, to respect what we had, while carrying on this way? Finally, I looked at her, my voice barely above a whisper. Amelia, I don't know if I can get past this. I don't know if I even want to try. Her face crumpled, and she nodded, her lips pressing together to keep herself from crying. I understand. I don't expect forgiveness, Alex. I don't even expect you to stay. I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Truly. We sat in silence after that, the weight of her words settling over us like a shroud. I could see her regret, the way it etched lines into her face, the way her hands trembled as she wiped away tears. But regret wasn't enough to bridge the gap between us, to undo the damage that had been done. After a few more minutes, I stood up, slipping my coat over my shoulders. I need time, Amelia. I don't know if we can fix this, but I need to think. She nodded, her gaze fixed on the table. Take all the time you need, Alex. I'll be here. I walked out of the coffee shop, my mind a blur. For the first time, I was starting to realize that maybe we weren't going to make it, that maybe the love we'd shared had been too fragile to withstand something like this. The next few weeks passed in a daze. I stayed in the hotel, giving us both space to process everything. I couldn't bring myself to go back to our apartment, to face the memories and the ghosts of what we'd had. Instead, I went through the motions, my mind haunted by the life we'd once shared and the betrayal that had torn it apart. One night, I sat alone in my hotel room, staring at the city lights outside the window. My mind kept returning to that coffee shop, to the sadness in her eyes, the regret in her voice. I knew she was sorry, that she was willing to do whatever it took to make things right. But I also knew that no amount of apologies could erase what she'd done. I thought about calling her, about telling her it was over, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the memory of the life we'd built together, the dreams we'd shared. Or maybe it was just the stubborn hope that somehow, some way, we could find our way back to each other. But even as I sat there, holding my phone, I knew the truth. Amelia had shattered something between us that couldn't be repaired. Trust, once broken, was almost impossible to rebuild. In the end, I didn't call her. I set my phone down, feeling the emptiness settle over me, knowing that this was a decision I'd have to make alone. Whether or not I could ever forgive her, or if forgiveness was even possible. But for now, all I could do was wait, lost in the silence, haunted by the echoes of a love that might be gone forever. After that night, I stopped waiting. Waiting for clarity, waiting for her to change, waiting to feel ready. I checked out of the hotel, took a cab back to the apartment, and braced myself for whatever was left of the life we'd once had. Stepping into the apartment felt surreal. It was the same place I'd left, but it felt different somehow, as if it no longer belonged to me. Or maybe as if I no longer belonged in it. Amelia was sitting on the couch when I came in, her eyes puffy and red-rimmed. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept since the night at the coffee shop. She sat up as I entered, her gaze following me as I set my bag down and took off my coat. "I didn't know if you'd come back," she said softly, her voice trembling. I stayed silent, unsure of what to say. Part of me had come back to end things, to make a clean break so that I could start fresh. But another part of me, the part that had been struggling ever since I found out, still wanted to believe there was a way forward. I sat down across from her, the space between us feeling wider than the room. "I don't know what I'm doing here," I said finally. "Every time I think I've made up my mind, I start second-guessing myself. I don't know how to move past this. I don't even know if I want to try." Her face crumpled, but she held back her tears, nodding slowly as she listened. "I understand," she whispered. "I know what I did was unforgivable, Alex. If I could take it back, if I could go back in time and undo all of this, I would. But I can't." We sat there in silence, her words lingering in the air. For the first time, I felt a flicker of empathy, however brief, for her. I could see the regret in her eyes, and I knew she wasn't just sorry because she'd been caught. She was sorry because she'd lost something she hadn't even realized she wanted to keep. But regret alone wasn't enough to rebuild a marriage. "I don't know how to trust you again, Amelia," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Every time I look at you, I remember everything. The lies, the secrets, the messages. It's like there's this wall between us now, and I don't know how to tear it down." She looked down, clasping her hands tightly. "I don't expect you to trust me right away," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I know it will take time. Maybe we can start small. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn your trust back, Alex. I don't care how long it takes. I can't bear the thought of losing you." Her words felt genuine, but the pain in my chest wouldn't let me soften. The love I still felt for her, the part of me that wanted to believe in second chances, was waging a silent battle against the anger and betrayal that simmered just beneath the surface. Over the next few weeks, we tried. I don't know why I agreed to it. Maybe I thought that, after everything, I owed it to us to at least try. We set boundaries, established rules for communication, made promises about transparency. She showed me her messages, her emails, every part of her life that had once been hidden. She deleted her accounts, cut off all contact with the men she'd seen, and agreed to let me know where she was at all times. But no matter how hard she tried, how open she became, the gnawing feeling of distrust wouldn't leave me. I could see her making the effort, every day, trying to rebuild what she destroyed. And I was trying too. I really was. I forced myself to let go of the anger, to let her back into my life in small, measured doses. Yet, every time she walked out the door, every time her phone buzzed with a new message, my heart would race, my mind filled with doubts. I felt trapped in a prison of my own making, shackled by the memory of her betrayal. One evening, I went out alone, needing some air, some space to clear my head. I found myself in a small bar a few blocks away, nursing a drink and staring at the rows of bottles lined up behind the counter. The bartender, a middle-aged woman with a friendly smile, noticed my expression and struck up a conversation. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders," she said with a sympathetic smile. "Want to talk about it?" I gave a half-hearted shrug. "Not much to talk about. Just going through a rough time." She nodded knowingly. "Relationships, huh? They can be hard. But sometimes letting go is the only way to heal." Her words struck a chord, and I sat there, replaying everything in my mind. The love we'd shared, the promises we'd made, the life we'd built. I'd thought that love was unbreakable, that we could survive anything. But now, I wasn't so sure. When I got home that night, Amelia was waiting up for me. She looked worried, her eyes searching my face as I walked in. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft. I nodded, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. I think I need to be alone for a while, Amelia." She paled, her eyes filling with tears. "Alex, please don't do this. We can work through this. I know we can." I took a deep breath, gathering the courage to say what I'd known all along. "I tried, Amelia. I tried to forgive you, to move past it. But every time I look at you, I remember what you did. I remember how it felt to know that you'd turned to strangers, that you'd put a price on our marriage. I can't live like this, always wondering, always doubting." She reached out, but I took a step back, the pain in her eyes mirrored by the ache in my own heart. "Maybe one day, I'll be able to forgive you. But right now, I need space. I need to find myself again." Her shoulders slumped, and she wiped a tear from her cheek. "If this is what you need, then I won't stop you." I left that night, taking only a few things with me. As I walked out of the apartment, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief, the weight of the past few months lifting slightly with every step. I didn't know where I was going, or what my life would look like without her. But I knew that I needed to move forward, to find a way to heal, even if it meant leaving behind the woman I'd once loved more than anything. In the days that followed, I stayed with a friend, throwing myself into work, trying to build a life that felt like my own again. I kept in touch with Amelia, exchanging a few messages here and there, but I didn't see her. Each message was a reminder of the life we'd shared, the life I was slowly letting go of. Months passed, and I began to find a semblance of peace, a new normal. I reconnected with old friends, rediscovered hobbies I'd forgotten, started exploring the world as my own person. The pain didn't disappear, but it dulled, fading into a memory that no longer controlled me. Then one day, I received a letter from Amelia. She'd moved out of the apartment, started a new job, was working on rebuilding her life. She told me that she understood why I'd left, that she respected my decision, but that she would always love me, always hold a place for me in her heart. As I read her words, I felt a mix of sadness and gratitude. We'd shared a beautiful, fragile love that hadn't survived the tests of time and temptation. But I knew that, in some way, she had given me a gift, a painful, bittersweet lesson about trust, forgiveness, and the strength it takes to let go. I put the letter away, feeling a sense of closure settle over me. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that I was finally ready to face it on my own terms. And as I stepped out into the world, I felt lighter, the weight of the past slowly fading, leaving me free to begin again. Subscribe to the channel and like this story if you liked it. Turn on notifications so you don't miss new stories. Click on the playlist on the right to listen to previous stories. See you soon.